Good morning. Welcome to Kingsport News Hour for the 28th day in the 11th month by the heavenly calendar and the 16th year of Cheongi. Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Cheongi Gyeonggi. Let's go and see what's going on around the kingdom right now. In Chongpyeong, Tennessee, 16 degrees, a little bit nippy this morning, partly cloudy. Today, not as cold with clouds and sunshine, high of 48. Okay, so maybe nice during the day. And then tonight, breezy this evening with a little rain, followed by periods of snow, rain late, accumulating a coat to an inch. Okay. And then at True Father's homeland, Cheongju in North Pyongan province, North Korea, it is 15 degrees there as well. So the cold there continues, partly cloudy. Getting down tonight to 3 degrees on the Fahrenheit scale. Tomorrow, partly sunny and colder with 24 degrees as a high. At the Cheonggyeong Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, currently 19 degrees and mostly clear, and high of 33 today. Windy with clouds and sunshine tonight. A little evening so with little or no accumulation, otherwise cloudy. And then at the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, clear and 45 degrees, sunny to partly cloudy, breezy and pleasant, high of 65. Oh, okay, nice. Tonight, clear and a low of 33. Suncheon Palace in South Korea, clear and 36, and mainly clear through the night tonight, and then 31 degrees for a low. Tomorrow, hazy sunshine, high of 55. At the Gunma Palaces in Japan, clear and 47, remaining clear through the night, a low of 31. Tomorrow, sunny, nice, warm, 63 degrees. That's what we like to hear. All right. At Guangzhou, Guangdong province in China, clear and 73. Clear through the night, 61 for a low. Tomorrow, very warm, plenty of sunshine, high of 81 degrees tomorrow. All right, let's go to Father's Word. And where are we today? Today we are the life of true filial piety. Chapter 3, 충효의 도리. 충효, 충효. Chung is loyalty, and Hyo is filial piety, and Tori, of course, is the way. And when we talked about Tori in terms of its context in the pledge, in the family pledge, Tori means basically sort of your ethical or moral role or responsibility, I suppose. The family pledge talks about the 가정의 도리, right? 가정의 도리. In other words, what? So people have different roles, right? You're a husband, you're a wife, you're a son, you're a father, you're a mother, you're a daughter, you're a brother, you're a sister, and of course, one person could have multiple roles, and each of those roles comes with a certain sort of expectations, and those expectations you can say are the tori role expectations. Yes. Let's see. Sure. So here, let's look at this one, this paragraph here. We're in section 3 of chapter 3. So it says, Father says here, speaking in April 18th, 1971. 효도를 하는 어버이가 있다면 이 어버이는 자기보다 더 효도하는 아들을 바랄 것입니다. So, if there is a father who is practicing filial piety, in other words, towards the father practicing filial piety towards his father and mother, 효도하는 어버이가 있다면, this father will want his son to practice even more filial piety than he does. 그래야 할아버지가 죽을 때 눈을 감고 죽을 수 있을 것이고 아버지가 죽을 때도 눈을 감고 죽을 수 있을 것이 아니라는 것입니다. So isn't that necessary? 것이 아니냐? Isn't that necessary then for the grandfather, the grandfather, to rest peacefully when he dies? Literally, Father is saying, close his eyes when he dies. But of course, anybody who dies, in general, we close our eyes when we die. But this is a sort of an idiom, I guess, saying that a person dies in peace, dies peacefully, is kind of that kind of meaning. Um, uh, so, so that's necessary then for the grandfather to die peacefully, and also for the father to be able to die peacefully as well. 아들을 자기보다 더 고생시킬 수 있는 심정이 아들을 사랑하는 것입니다. So the 심정, remember 심정, the our irrepressible impulse of the heart to invest love in an object partner so as to experience love and joy. So the 심정 of having the son uh, work harder, not suffer really, right? 고생 is not suffer, 고생 kind of suffer, but work harder is actually a 심정 of loving the son. So so don't spare the rod, basically, I guess, or make the son work harder, make the son work harder, so that the son can complete his character. Okay. All right, so let's go then see what is happening. Okay. And let's go to this story to begin with. Venezuela's Machado, I'm sorry, gives Trump her Nobel Peace Prize medal. Opposition leader Maria Corina Machado was awarded the Peace Prize in December 2025 for her fight for democracy. And here it is, proud. Yeah, he looks pretty happy, doesn't he? He looks pretty happy. I'm sure he'd rather that it be his Nobel Prize, but she is being very kind. And let's see if I can read what it says here. In gratitude for Your Excellency's leadership in, what is this? Protecting peace through strength, advancing diplomacy, and or is it advocating defense and defending liberty and prosperity. And here it says oh, the 2025, I'm sorry, 2025 Nobel Peace Medal presented by Maria Corina Machado, and here it says presented as a personal symbol of gratitude on behalf of the Venezuelan people in recognition of President Trump's principled and decisive action to secure a free Venezuela. And the courage of America and its President Donald J. Trump will never be forgotten by the Venezuelan people. Yeah, so very nice. And she didn't just hand him the medal, she fixed it up in this very nice gold rimmed frame. And yeah, she really did it up very nicely, didn't she? Yeah, very good. And you can see he's very happy. And it looks like they're standing in front of a copy of the Declaration of Independence, it looks like, on the wall of the White House there, the Oval Office, I assume. Anyway, wall of the White House. Okay. President Donald Trump meets with Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado in the Oval Office, okay, during which she presented the president with her Nobel Peace Prize on January 15th, 2026. Okay. I think the Nobel Peace Prize is kind of overrated myself. I think each year we discover that it's often given to someone that or some group that serves the leftist agenda. Although not this particular time, I guess, but in other situations that has been the case, and uh, it's it's done by the Norwegian. I think it's the Norwegian Parliament. I think has a committee or something like that that decides who does it each year, and so it's kind of a kind of a leftist thing these years. Kim Dae-jung, for example, uh, received the Nobel Peace Prize, and but he's really responsible for South Korea taking a real sharp left turn in its course. So uh, anyway, but President Trump, I know, thinks very highly of the prize, and he wants it. And but now he has a Nobel Peace Prize, not but just not his own. Okay, all right. So he'll have to be satisfied with that for now. Okay. All right. So recently, there's been a lot of stuff going on in terms of the money and finance, but and this is connected, of course, to the situation in with Iran and with the whole world situation. And let me see. I just realized something. Okay. All right. Well, and in terms of Iran, by the way, things are sort of continuing, sort of not really making much headway one way or the other. Uh, President Trump warned the people in Iran to not to execute or not to kill too many people, and they say that they are probably holding up on that, but it's hard. We don't know, actually. We don't know because much of the communication, much of the internet, or if not all the internet, has been cut. So we don't really know what's going on inside Iran right now. A former CIA officer, I think it is, was saying that if things remain as they are, then the Iranian regime is simply going to, in his expression, kill their way through this, and that's what these people do, right? That's what happened in Tiananmen Square in 1989, June 1989. The Chinese Communist Party literally killed their way through it. The demonstrations of the mostly students, college students that were demonstrating on Tiananmen Square for democracy. They even made a sort of a statue. I think it was made of paper mache, but it was kind of a statue of something similar to the Statue of Liberty. They brought it in. Maybe that was what really triggered the CCP's response. But anyway, the CCP brought out the military with their vehicles and uh, quite literally mowed people down and sacrificed thousands of lives in just one night there, and uh, tracking down the leaders. And the leaders of that movement are still suffering. Some of them in jail, or some have been killed. So Iran maybe doing something similar. We don't know. We had that number where someone said that 12,000 people have died, and I remain skeptical of that. I think these situations like this, there are people who are motivated to increase the body count. So we have to watch out for that. So we don't really know how many have died. So that's going on. And meanwhile, of course, in Venezuela, President Trump continues to try and take control. And it looks like Delcy Rodriguez, the acting president, I guess you can say, is more or less falling in line with the Trump, but at the same time trying to appease her, well, the people who have the guns in Venezuela. She has to, America has guns, but she's also got other people in the country that have guns, and so she has to work between these two piles of guns, as it were, to stay alive and stay in office. So, but she seems to be doing a relatively adroit job, shall we say, in doing that and staying alive and staying in office so far. Meanwhile, in East Asia, there's been a lot of going on, and so um, let me just show you here. And Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary of the U.S., has been expressing concern about both the Japanese yen and also the Korean won. And as you can see, the Japanese yen right now is at 158.07, I guess it is right now. And we've looked at this graph before, But it started really, there's really about December of 2020, and there's been a consistent sort of upward pattern, right? You have a sort of a three peaks here, but on the bottom side, you can see that there's seems to be overall there seems to be a strong upward pattern for the dollar. When this line goes up, it means that the dollar is rising in value against the Japanese yen. And it was at 100 yen as recently as, what is this, April of 2016. So about roughly 10 years ago, it was just 100 yen to the dollar. The dollar and the uh, yen were more or less at a one-to-one exchange rate, right? Briefly there. And it came a bit and it was kind of stable there for a while. But then there's been an upward movement. And Scott Bessent now is expressing some concern about this. And Japan, so, and here then, let's see if we can get this up. And the Japanese finance minister, whose name is Katayama, met with Bessent and is trying to sort of discourage speculators or traders from betting against the further weakness of the Japanese yen. So, so here the comments seek to reintroduce two-way risk into USD/JPY, reminding markets that verbal intervention could escalate if depreciation of the Japanese yen continues. Katayama raises concern over weak yen with Washington, says one-sided foreign exchange movements are unacceptable. One-sided means that people are basically buying the dollar and selling the yen, betting that the yen is going to weaken even further. Confirms bilateral meeting with U.S. Treasury's Bessent. Yen strengthens following the verbal intervention. So she's saying that Katayama is saying that, listen, if you guys keep on doing this, you know what, we're going to go into the market and we're going to start buying our own currency. And when that happens, the value of the yen is going to go up, the dollar is going to go down, and you guys are going to lose money. So be careful. So that's sort of the way that they try to do verbal intervention. Officials signal tolerance for weakness is limited. So the yen strengthened after Finance Minister Katayama signaled renewed concern over the currency's weakness, confirming she had raised the issue directly with U.S. officials in Washington. And she said she had held a bilateral discussion with U.S. Treasury Scott Bessent, during which he conveyed Japan's concerns, what he described as a one-sided decline in the yen. And Katayama said she explicitly shared Tokyo's unease over the weak currency, reinforcing the message that excessive disorderly moves in foreign exchange markets remain unacceptable. So governments do this, central banks do this when it's not going their way, right? When it's not going their way. And so you can see here that when she said that, then boom, the value of the dollar kind of crashed, but crashed from 158 to 157. So it's in the big picture, it's not much of a crash, but because this is what is this? This is a daily chart, right? This is a daily chart. So it looks like this red candle here looks like a big crash, but then also, so it went down to 157,900, right? 157.9, and where does it say it is now? 158.07. So it's climbing back up. So it's climbing back up. 158. It's climbed up this far again. Okay. Well, what is it now? 158.07. Yeah. Okay. So it's up to about here. Yeah. About here. Okay. So governments try to control or at least influence the market this way, and they do it by selling or buying their own currency. They do it by buying their own currency. And what do they use to buy their own currency? You have to have something to buy, right? Well, they use dollars. And where do they get their dollars? Well, they get their dollars by selling assets that they have, dollar-denominated assets, namely U.S. Treasuries. They sell the U.S. Treasuries, they take the cash, and they go to the foreign exchange market, and then they buy their own currency to support that currency. And here's another example of that. Here, let's let you see the headline here. China sells treasuries for 9 straight months as foreign buyers snap up debt. Ah, that's interesting. So does that mean that de-dollarization is accelerating? Well, let's find out. China has been a net seller of U.S. Treasuries for 9 straight months now, even as the overall amount of U.S. debt held by foreigners hits a record. So the overall amount of U.S. debt held by foreigners, in other words, foreign countries and foreign institutions and individuals, is now higher than it's ever been before. Higher than it's ever been before. Okay. In November, China sold a net 5.39 billion of U.S. debt. Treasury data released Thursday afternoon show. It comes after China sold net 14.96 billion in October and 9.97 billion in September. And the third largest foreign holder of U.S. debt has been selling the securities since March. So since March, China's been selling. Overall foreign holdings of treasuries, meanwhile, reached a record $9.36 trillion. So it's a record there. Japan was also a net seller in November. So this is where they're getting their cash to buy the yen on the market, shedding 3.201 billion. But that was the first month of selling for the country since April. Japan holds the most amount of U.S. debt at $1.2 trillion, followed by the U.K. So the U.K. also has a lot of U.S. treasuries. For China, the selling could be a strategic decision to diversify away from the U.S. amid growing policy tensions. And well, in the case of China, obviously they're preparing for the option. They're preparing for the option of invading Taiwan, and they haven't decided. That's still, I think, just an option and not a certain thing. But if they do invade Taiwan, then America is going to freeze their assets. This is kind of a given. And so they want to get out of treasuries and buy gold. So they've been buying gold, hand over fist for the last few years. And that's one reason why gold has been going up so much in price, especially over the past year. But not just China, though. Other central banks as well have been buying gold. More recently, President Donald Trump said he would impose 25% tariffs on any country doing business with Iran. Well, well, guess who's doing business with Iran? Well, China. And a 500% tariff on imports from any country purchasing Russian origin oil, uranium, and other products. Okay, who's purchasing Russian oil and uranium and other products? Well, China. So they want to get out of U.S. treasuries as much as they can. But they're doing it in a way that's really not affecting the price of U.S. treasuries. You see that? Because, and the reason, of course, is that other foreign buyers are happy to buy any treasuries that China and Japan put on the market. India, which imports Russian oil, has been a net seller of U.S. treasuries for 6 months now. Yeah, and again, India is also buying gold, I think. The data for November showed sales of 5.07 billion. Bear in mind that the U.S. debt market is the biggest in the world with $30.3 trillion of treasuries outstanding. So with $30.3 trillion, for example, with India's 5 billion is just a drop in the bucket. And even let's see, Japan 3 billion in November. The entire market is 30 trillion, right? So 3 billion is again just a drop in the bucket, about what 1,000th of the entire market, and also the 9 trillion. So about close to a third, I guess, of all treasuries are held by foreigners. Okay. All right, so that's what's going on there. Also, let's see, I wanted to look at the South Korean won as well. And South Korean won also has been going up this way. And similar to the Japanese yen, and they're at about 14 this morning. They're at about 14. What are they right now? Here. 1472 right now, it looks like. Okay. But also there's been, Besant has been talking about the South Korean won as well and trying to limit the decline of the won against the US dollar as well. And Korea mulls further measures as won wobbles even after Besant's jawboning. And jawboning is this kind of verbal intervention. And that's fairly rare, apparently, that the U.S. Treasury would would try to support the won in this way. The unprecedented verbal intervention by the U.S. Treasury chief briefly brought the exchange rate down, only for it to surge again as investors swooped in to buy dollars at a lower price. The problem in Korea is that um, Koreans like to invest not in their own stock market so much, but in the American stock market. So they're buying U.S. You can buy U.S. stocks through South Korean brokers apparently, and that's what they're doing. And they figure that the U.S. stock market is going to be more profitable for them than the Korean stock market. But then when they do that, though, in order to invest in the U.S. stock market, they have to what? They have to buy dollars, and so that increases the strength of the demand for the dollars, and they're selling Korean won, and so that brings down the price of the Korean won and increases the price of the U.S. dollars in relationship. So foreign exchange is always, you're doing relationship between one currency and another. And some people say, oh, the dollar's going down or the dollar's going up. That means that there's a basket of currencies that they use to measure whether, the strength of the dollar. And that, by the way, is called that sort of um, that that sort of basket of currencies is called the dollar index. And that dollar index has been going down, as we've pointed out before. And it's down by about 10% since President Trump took office in the past year, from about 108 to about 99 right now. But 10% move over a course of a year is not such a drastic move, and it seems to have stabilized over the past 6, 7 months. So these currency, the currency, I don't know, it's not a currency war, is it? It's not, nobody's at war over the currencies, but the people who are riding the white horse of the apocalypse are concerned about what's happening in the relationships among the various currencies, and so that shows that well, they're trying to keep a grip on things, but that's a pretty tough thing to do. But they're certainly trying. Okay. So of course, when the currency goes down, that means that import prices go up, because if your own country's currency is weak, then especially if you're a country that is importing oil or importing food, importing other things that overall consumers use, then you're then those things become more expensive because your currency is going down in relationship to, and trade is mostly done on the basis of the dollar, and so uh, those imports are going to be rising in price. For exports, it's good because then your export prices are going down. That means more people can come in with their dollars and they can buy more stuff. So it goes both ways, but overall, governments don't like to see um, drastic moves in currencies over a short term, and also businessmen also don't like to see drastic moves over the short term either, because it becomes difficult for them to plan their own foreign currency policies. All right, let's look at some of the implications of what's going on in Iran, although we don't know exactly what is going on, but we know some of the implications. And this story covers that, or it covers one aspect of it. So with Iran in crisis, okay, its allies prepare to fight for themselves. So I've mentioned that if Iran does change regimes, then that's going to be a huge thing in the Middle East. And one person was saying that it's on level with the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I don't know if it's that big, but I suppose it is. Yeah, I suppose it is pretty, certainly in terms of the Middle East, it certainly is. And the Middle East, of course, influences a lot of the world. So perhaps that is not far from being far. Uh, that's not far. It may actually be true. Let me increase this here. Okay. The As Iran grapples with internal unrest and threats from foreign foes, its axis of resistance allies, we're not using axis of evil anymore, are we? Are preparing for potential confrontations on their own territories without counting on the direct support of the Islamic Republic. The coalition established over the course of decades with aid from Iran and its elite Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps had long served as a network of largely non-state actors, with the exceptions of Iran and Syria, that shared aims of opposing Israel, countering U.S. and Saudi influence, and defeating rival militants such as the Islamic State. And it's not yet certain that things are going to turn out in Iran the way that many people would like to see. Not yet certain that the Iranian regime is going to go down. And President Trump has talked about intervening, and perhaps he feels that he may need to sort of put his thumb on the scale, so to speak, give a little push to the insurgents. But also, President Trump is concerned about, okay, but what's going to happen if the current group of mullahs goes down? If they go down, who's going to take over? And that's not at all clear. There is no real united opposition leader. I know the son of the former Shah is trying to present himself as a natural choice to take over the reins of power in Iran. But President Trump is far from convinced that this is something that he will be able to do. And so there is a question then so that maybe that is why President Trump is hesitating right now and still watching to see what's going to happen there. The core collective goal of mounting a united front against Israel was to put to test in October 2023 after the Palestinian Hamas movement ignited a regional war with its surprise attack that drew in Lebanon's Hezbollah, Yemen's Ansar Allah, as well as a number of factions constituting the Islamic resistance in Iraq, which also operated out of Syria. While the confrontation saw each of these groups take action against Israel, they also suffered major blows, including the killing of key personnel and destruction of equipment. The toppling of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad at the hands of the Islamist-led rebel offensive amid the war marked another major setback, cutting Iran's logistical ties to the front lines with Israel. The conflict also saw Iran's long-touted strategy of establishing strategic depth against Israel rolled back to the Islamic Republic's own territory, particularly during the 12-day war, that saw the arch foes exchange direct strikes and an unprecedented U.S. bombing of Iranian nuclear sites. With Iran today focused increasingly on domestic security, following some of the largest protests to rock the nation in years, and threats of renewed U.S. intervention, factions of the axis of resistance are in the midst of a major recalibration that Renad Mansour, director of the Chatham House's Iraq Initiative, argued has been years in the making. I think it's been actually a few years where we've seen a change in the structure of the axis of resistance away from that sort of hierarchical structure in which Iran was the top, and it had all these proxies or clients in the region, and Iran invested heavily in them, and they represented effectively Iran's forward defense in the Middle East, Mansour told Newsweek. Now, with the possibility of the axis of resistance's enemies taking action to exploit Iran's distraction, Mansour said they're still there fighting for themselves amid and prioritizing local survival. Right? And this looks like, what is this? This is Hezbollah members and supporters holding a funeral there for one of their leaders. Hezbollah's existential battle Hezbollah, established in the 1980s amid resistance to Israeli intervention during Lebanon's multi-sided civil war that ranged from 1975 to 1999, has long been viewed as the most powerful arm of the axis of resistance and perhaps one of the most well-armed and well-organized paramilitary groups in the world. But after twice battling Israel to cease fires, Hezbollah's decision to open a second front against Israel by intervening just a day after Hamas's surprise attack drew an especially fierce retaliation. While the group suffered sizable personnel losses, the most dramatic operations came in the form of a series of bombings that struck communications devices used by members in September 2024 and the assassination of longtime Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah in an airstrike shortly afterward. By November of that year, the group opted to sign a truce with Israel that would see both sides withdraw forces from southern Lebanon. Yet today, both parties remain active near the Israel-Lebanon border and continue to accuse one another of violating the ceasefire terms, with Israel continuing to conduct strikes across the neighboring nation on a semi-regular basis and calling for Hezbollah's total disarmament. Israel is determined to finish off Hezbollah as a military organization, so it's independent of what may or may not happen in Iran, and the Israelis made it very clear that they will not live with Hezbollah as a military organization. Hilal Kashan, professor at the American University of Beirut, told Newsweek. At the same time, he said Hezbollah refuses to disarm, as doing so would render them indistinguishable in Lebanese politics, where the group represents one of many competing parties, most of them along sectarian lines, and even competes within its own camp with the fellow Shiite Muslim Amal movement. Hassan also noted that Shiite Muslims, who make up around a third and likely a plurality of the country, also home to a similar share of Sunni Muslims and Christians, also represent a proportionate percentage of the Lebanese army. With the military, while the military is a non-sectarian institution, he argued that any attempt by Lebanese troops to disarm Hezbollah could result in the fragmentation of the armed forces and return to civil war that tore the country apart. The only path forward he saw for the Lebanese army to play a substantial role would be as peacekeepers in the event of a new large-scale Israeli intervention, the likes of which reports indicate that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is currently planning. Should such an operation commence, he felt it unlikely that Tehran would be in a position to come to its allies' aid. I don't think Iran will be a factor, even in the event that the U.S. decides against threatening Iran. An Israeli attack on Hezbollah is most unlikely to invite a direct Iranian intervention, Kashan said. I think even if the regime survives the current wave of protest, I think they will focus on their domestic affairs. So he's talking about the Iranian regime surviving their current wave of protest. And that still is a definite possibility. Things are still in process there in Iran. Yet even Hezbollah's battlefield woes, the group is widely assessed, including by Israeli officials, to retain substantial military capabilities, including a wealth of small arms, rocket launchers, drones, and precision-guided missiles that could be mobilized with or without Iranian support. So where are they getting all the money for this? Well, it's oil, eventually. It's Iran, getting oil and selling it in spite of all sorts of sanctions and passing on money to Hezbollah, and then Iran buying the weapons for them and passing the weapons to them. But anyway, in any case, this is coming from oil, one way or another, by people who want Hezbollah to continue to be a factor in the Middle East. Iran could and has previously sent military advisors to Lebanon to assist Hezbollah in military training, and they can likely always find room to continue to do this if Israel were to launch another full-scale war in Lebanon, even if Iran was in a state of domestic turmoil, Lebanese analyst Ali Rizik told Newsweek. Even in the abundance of Iranian advisors, I think Hezbollah still has the brains within its ranks to put up a strong fight. If the U.S. decides to attack Iran, what would happen depends a lot on the nature of American intervention. If Washington pursues regime change in Iran, Hezbollah may initiate some kind of action to prevent the collapse of the Iranian leadership, given the special sacred ties between the leadership and Hezbollah, and the fact that toppling the Iranian state would be an existential threat to Hezbollah. Rizk added, they could very well include action against Israel. Action against Israel. I don't know. So I don't know if Hezbollah is actually going to Iran right now to help put down the protest. That I don't see any reports on that, although I would think that that might be happening. And for the first time in decades, this existential threat also emanates from Syria in the eyes of Hezbollah. And many of its supporters, given the Sunni Islamist background of President Ahmad al-Sharaa, whose Hayat Tahrir al-Sham faction, formerly the Nusra Front, you got to have a program to keep track of all this. People, former this, former that, clashed with the Lebanese group throughout Syria's own civil war. The only reality further complicates the reality further complicates questions over Hezbollah's arsenal. Security in such a perceived threat environment is a more pressing priority than economic livelihood, Rizk said. The issue of Hezbollah's weapons hints includes an important sectarian dimension, with Shiites happening to be the single largest religious sect in Lebanon, which makes the issue that much more complicated. Newsweek has reached out to a representative of Hezbollah for comment. And with Hezbollah suffering the brunt of Israel's campaign, Ansar Allah, widely known as the Houthi movement, has emerged as the new top contender for most powerful non-state faction of the axis of resistance. The group has also demonstrated the capability to wage long-range warfare against targets at land, air, and sea that rivals even conventional standing armies. Rooted in 1990s religious movement representing Yemen's Zaidi Shiite Muslim community, which constitutes more than a third of the country, the group launched an insurgency against the government after the killing of its leader, Hussein al-Houthi, at the hands of security forces in 2004. A decade later, amid civil war, the group, led by Houthi's son, Abdul Malek, seized the capital, Sana'a, establishing a rival government that presides over around a third of the country and 80% of its population. The conflict has largely been frozen since Ansar Allah reached a UN-backed truce with Yemen's Saudi-backed international government in April 2022. After the outbreak of the war in Gaza the following year, however, Ansar Allah began launching strikes at Israel as well as commercial vessels, at one point effectively cutting trade through the Red Sea and Suez Canal by 2/3. The campaign drew U.S. and Israeli strikes that are believed to have dealt considerable damage to the group's capabilities as well as command and control, though its chief and heads of the Ansar Allah-backed government have evaded the same fate as Nasrallah and Hamas leaders, so they're still alive. The U.S. paused attacks on Ansar Allah after a truce signed in May of last year, and the group halted its strikes on Israel and trade vessels following the Gaza ceasefire reached in September. Faria al-Muslimi, research fellow at the Chatham House's Middle East and North Africa program, said the U.S. strikes in particular really did harm to the Houthis, disrupting capabilities and communications, yet the huge shock was in the matter of the significance of the entire idea of the axis of resistance, which had previously been thought of as untouchable. That perception is already weakened, Muslimi told Newsweek, so in that sense, there is no damage control the Houthis can really do. Yet the battlefield situation is different for a group already known to command a greater degree of independence from Iran than some other axis of resistance members, both in ideology and operations. He noted that in a matter of military technicalities, I have no doubt that they basically by now are standing on their own 2 feet, and that the 2 ceasefires established last year definitely did buy them a lot of time to regroup, re-strategize, and focus on rebuilding what they lost. Some of this focus is now directed toward Yemen, where one of the most sizable shifts in territorial control has occurred in recent weeks between 2 of Ansar Allah's top foes. After the United Arab Emirates-backed Southern Transitional Council suddenly seized Saudi-backed government's positions. A swift counteroffensive regained lost ground and went further, leading to the dissolution of the Southern separatist movement and the withdrawal of the Emirati allies from Yemen. So I think we saw that in the news that UAE backed UAE backed forces were withdrawing from Yemen, but we didn't really uh, realize the significance of that in the overall picture. Because as you can see, the situation in the Middle East is incredibly complicated with or sort of there's this axis of resistance and Saudi backed and all this kind of thing. Yeah. Good. Um, and so forth. Okay, so this goes on for a while, but so here Iraq at a crossroads, right? At a crossroads. While both Hezbollah and Ansar Allah operate at a geographical distance from Iran, the stakes may be highest of all for the Islamic Republic's allies in neighboring Iraq. Islamic Republic is another name for Iran. The fellow majority Muslim nation hosts, we're talking about Iraq now, host an array of militias. This is why it's so complicated, right? Array of militias active in the open since the US-led invasion that toppled former President Saddam Hussein in 2003. For years, these forces battled both US troops and jihadi Sunni Muslim insurgents, including al-Qaeda, before the emergence of ISIS as a common threat for Washington, Tehran, and what would become the Popular Mobilization Force. Okay, so going on there in Iraq. Okay, so this is quite a long article, isn't it? Okay, I guess this is in Newsweek. All right, so anyway, whatever happens in Iran, it looks like its influence in the Middle East is going to be weakened, but the issue is by how much? By how much? And U.S. Of course, would like to see these forces reduced in their influence. And I suppose everyone would. But well, anyway, we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. Okay. All right, let's see here. Let's go to where should we go? Let's go to the Epic Times, I guess, or Newsmax. So let's go to Newsmax first. Let me help you see this. Okay, what are we looking at here? All options on the table. U.S. envoy warns Iran an emergency UN session. Okay, I guess that's happening. That happened Thursday. Okay, yesterday. After weeks of escalating tension, U.S. and Iranian officials faced each other Thursday at the UN Security Council, where America's envoy renewed threats against the Islamic Republic despite President Trump's efforts to lower the temperature between the adversaries. Mideast allies are urging Trump to delay Iran's strikes, according to a source. Okay. But someone says that the U.S. is ready to strike Iran if needed. And the Pentagon is moving a carrier strike group toward the Middle East. And Lindsey Graham, again, he's really right now the sort of the foremost proponent of the globalist agenda, the war agenda, disputes claims that Trump won't act on Iran. And Senator Husted to Newsmax, no limits to Iran's terrorist intentions. And yes, if Iran survives this current situation, then yeah, they're going to come back with a vengeance against people that they and countries that they perceive as being their enemies, namely Iran and Israel and the United States. Senator Husted, a Republican of Ohio, said Thursday that Iran cannot be trusted, warning that its leadership is increasingly relying on violence to maintain power as questions grow over the Iranian government's response to ongoing unrest and threats directed at President Donald Trump. In an interview with National Report, Husted said Iran's clerical regime has spent decades brutalizing its own people while targeting Americans and U.S. interests abroad, arguing that recent statements, excuse me, take a little. For over 40 years, they've been brutalizing their own people, I'm sorry, thwarting American interests, killing Americans around the globe, as I said, just because they say that they're not going to do something today that could all change tomorrow. And these remarks come amid conflicting reports over whether Iranian security forces have halted violence against protesters following claims by Iranian officials that killings had stopped. Yeah, I think that's a good point that he's making, that you really can't tell whether you don't know what they mean. First of all, you don't know what they actually mean. And then you don't know whether they're actually following through on what they say. Um, where are we here? Okay. Images and videos circulating online appear to show continued clashes between demonstrators and authorities, raising doubts about official assurances. Husted described Iran's leadership as weakened and under mounting internal pressure, portraying a regime he believes in is nearing collapse. Nearing, yes, well, you know, nearing is not enough. It's got to actually collapse. He pointed to Iran's struggling economy, aging religious leadership, and setbacks suffered by Iranian-backed militant groups across the Middle East. But no one is talking about the collapse of the currency. And things basically come down to money, basically. Let's see if I can find the Iranian currency here. Let's see here. Which one would be Iran? Okay, let's go to Europe, America, Asia. Would that be in Asia? Probably, I guess. Okay, must be in Asia. Okay. Which one of these is Iran? Is this it? I think it is. USDIRR. That's probably it. Okay. Yeah, okay. Iranian. Okay, this is Iran. Okay. This is the Iranian currency. And this is the when it goes up as before, that means the dollar is getting stronger. And here it was what? It was 46,000 of the real, or toman, I guess they say. And then going up here, 1,065,000. Okay, so, and then also just in the last, unfortunately, 1 year is the only one we can have. We don't get a monthly or what here, but here is where it collapsed, because it sort of collapsed in stages here, but beginning of December 31st, or the end of last year, all of a sudden collapsing like this, right? Collapsing like this. So I don't know what caused this collapse, but this is pretty much what is behind the unrest there, because now you can see that the import prices are going to go. They're going to more than double. Here it's 42,000, and here's 1,065,000, right? Now today. So the value of the dollar now is more than 2.5 times. And this, I think, is this the official rate? I think maybe it is the official rate. So black market rate will be even worse, much worse. Yeah. Yeah, the fact that it's steady like this shows that it's most probably this is the official rate. Yeah. So this is what I would like for people to, or I would like for journalists to focus on, the influence of the collapse of the currency, but they're not doing that at all for some reason. Okay, and so Okay. The role of money in international politics is very interesting, and it's well, eventually people want it. They want money, don't they? Because with money you can have a stable economy, and stable economy is very important for people who are just trying to work and get paid and well, we saw we learned about the role that money had in Weimar Germany, Weimar Republic of Germany after World War One, right? And how this is supposed to have been a major cause for the rise of Hitler after World War One and going into World War Two. So we always, I think, need to look at what's happening with the money. And people talk about de-dollarization. I remain skeptical. I think there's certainly a lot of desire for de-dollarization, but as you saw, uh, the U.S. debt is being bought up continually by foreigners. Both foreigners means both nations and foreign institutions, banks, and so forth, and individuals. So people in this age, they still want dollars because dollars are sort of seen as being sort of stable and something that you can trust. It only, I mean, yes, the dollar is also depreciating, or it's actually weakening against goods and services, right? Several percent a year, but still they prefer the dollar to their own currency or to any other currency for that matter. Not entirely, but in many respects. And still, Koreans are still investing in the U.S. stock market. Net, of course, they also invest in their own stock market, but they'd like to invest in the U.S. stock market, and they're doing that. And they're doing that partly because they believe that dollar-denominated assets are going to serve them in the long run better than their own uh, one denominated assets. So it's um, so there's always seems to be money in the background of things that are taking place. And I think the same is true with Iran right now. And we saw that since December 31, just in the past 2 weeks or so, the dollar has gained on official rate more than 2.5 times. That's an incredible change in the rate just in a very short time. And that, of course, is always going to bring about social instability because people, like their money, they get their paycheck, but then they find that they can't buy anything with that paycheck. And who's to say that the same will not happen in the United States? Who's to say, right? And so we will see. Well, we'll see what happens eventually. But still, right now, as of today, and probably tomorrow as well, the dollar is still king of all the currencies by a large margin, by large margin. But we don't know what's going to happen, you know, uh, at any given time. We saw the real, for example, suddenly at the end of the year, December 31, boom, the value of the dollar went up. And I don't know why that happened. Why did that happen? What happened on December 31 that caused that? I can't find any articles that explain that. So if you can find articles, maybe you can send those to me. I'd be very interested in reading that kind of a story. Okay. All right, let's see here. We got a couple minutes here. I'm looking at more Newsmax headlines. Uh, Trump announces board of peace formed for Gaza. Is this the one that Tony Blair is going to be on? Um, Who's on it? Who's on it? Who's on it? Who's on it? I don't see who's on it. Uh, okay. Well, anyway, I think This is this is the one that that they were saying Tony Blair was going to be on. Uh, he probably is on it anyway. Anyway, we'll see how that works. Board of peace, you know. I have to laugh. And we're at 10 o'clock. I have to go, but in Korea, in 1953, they formed something called the Military Armistice Commission, and they also formed something with the Neutral Nations something, something, something. And Sweden is on that, India is on that, and I can't remember the other countries that are on that. But it still exists. But it does, at least at last I heard, it still exists, but it does absolutely nothing. So this board of peace, we'll have to see what actually happens with it. All right, gotta go. I'll see you tomorrow. God bless, Godspeed. May his kingdom come quickly.